Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. As promised, today's review is going to be on Loki, now that all 6 episodes are out and available to watch on Disney+. Because there's quite a lot that I want to say about this series and the other Marvel TV shows in general, as we've kind of entered phase 4 now with hints of what's going to be coming. And I've got to admit, I was a skeptic about Loki, particularly because I was such a huge fan of Loki's arc throughout the MCU. His arc was very noticeable and poignant throughout those movies, this kind of anti-hero redemption arc that he went on. And particularly with a film franchise like Marvel and the Avengers, I'm a huge fan of characters actually getting endings. You know, it's why I don't think Endgame's going to get beaten for me, because Cap got his send-off, Natasha got her send-off, Tony Stark got his send-off, and I respect when franchises can make a permanent decision to kill a character or retire a character and move on, you know, so we do have a complete arc and a complete journey to look back on. And I feel like we absolutely had that with Loki, even though he was only in Infinity War for, 5 minutes? Just that one line, Odin's son, and that one look he gives Thor, for me, resolved everything. And it was just this beautiful moment of direction from the Russo bros and performance from Tom Hiddleston that really sold how Loki wasn't trying to kill Thanos for any ulterior motive other than to protect his brother. And so obviously when he got the Tesseract in Endgame and caused that little branch in time, I was kind of, I didn't mind it because I was very intrigued to see what they were going to do with it, but part of me was like, please leave it alone. Because I do think Loki is one of those characters who's had probably one of the best arcs throughout the films, and particularly at the point in time when he's disrupted, we've basically lost all of that development when we meet the new Loki in the series. And what kind of annoyed me, particularly in the first few episodes, was how quickly they tried to make Loki compassionate and apologetic and sympathetic and just all out guilty. You know, bearing in mind, moments before he was seized by the TVA, Loki was charging down the streets of New York, smiling gleefully while gunning down innocent civilians. And then in the first episode of Loki, to have him heartfelt and admitting, I don't like hurting people, you know, or picture that scene in Stuttgart, Germany, when he's gouging the guy's eye out and smiling sadistically while everyone flees in fear. In terms of a timeline of chronology, we're really not that far on, and then all of a sudden Loki's apologising for these things. It just felt too soon for me, this kind of pivotal moment that should have come in the series. I do agree it was right that we'd have this moment of self-reflection and retrospection for Loki, but to have it in the very first episode, to me, was very off from a narrative structural point of view. A bit like what they did with Bucky and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when we got that like 2-minute scene of Bucky in Wakanda as he's psychologically getting over the Hydra words, as the Dora Milaje help him overcome that conditioning. And you know, to me, that is Bucky's pivotal moment as a character, as an arc, and it's the key to getting him where he was when we met him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, in this process of recovery. But we got it as a 2-minute scene to open an episode, and it just felt so disregarded. You know, I wish we'd had a few more flashbacks to him struggling with that and struggling to overcome it, and then culminating in this triumphant moment. So for me, with all the Marvel shows, there have been a few moments that haven't seemed to capitalize on these pivotal character defining moments, or have put them in the wrong places throughout the series. And also the first 4 episodes of Loki, I was genuinely worried. I really wasn't getting into it. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen all these fan vids of Loki and Sylvie and how people are like, oh my god, finally getting together, my emotions can't handle it. I'm not sure what people were watching, but I really just didn't see the chemistry there. I felt Tom Hiddleston's performance was a bit forced in that regard. I'm not against the relationship, I just wish they'd built it up in a way that felt a bit more authentic. And especially considering he started falling for her, or hinted that he'd fallen for her, I think in episode 4, and they'd only really spent 2 episodes together. So again, it's something that I think they've not made the most of as a television format, is the time to flesh things out. 6 episodes does feel too condensed, and I felt that with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki. You know, there's a lot of relationships that with a couple more, maybe 8 episodes, we could have expanded on that and made it feel like a more organic progression to the point. And I'm not gonna lie, all the TVA stuff I just really didn't enjoy. The TVA always felt very small for me on screen, considering what it was supposed to represent. You know, we only really got to know Mobius, Renslayer, and that one other guard, like 3 characters in the TVA. So this kind of grand plot about this organization who control the flow of time and rectify breaches in this preordained timeline, there was this weird juxtaposition between the scale of it as a concept and the practicalities of it as something brought to life. And of the TVA, we only ever really saw like Renslayer's office, or where Tom Hiddleston watched his main timeline play out. But luckily, Loki for me started to really redeem itself in episode 5. Episodes 5 and 6 did a lot of heavy lifting to get me to enjoy this show. Firstly, the colour scheme. You know, the purples, the greens, the yellows. It just was so visually stunning in episodes 5 and 6 as they went to the void. And also this haunted-esque castle at the end of time where He Who Remains dwells. It was just visually stunning to kind of go on that journey and see those places brought to life. I think the VFX team and the production designers and the cinematographers really did a fantastic job of bringing that stuff to life in a way that the TVA never really came to life for me. And the music, Natalie Holt's music has to be commended, particularly in episodes 5 and 6. I felt a real sense of like mystic sorcery going on in the tunes. Oh, and also shout out to episode 3, you know, Tom Hiddleston singing in Old Norse was really unexpected and really quite beautiful. And a lovely little hint at, you know, his Norse origins and a throwback to that. Something we never really tapped into too much in the Thor movies. But the big reason why episodes 5 and 6 were hugely redeeming for the show was because of 2 characters who aren't even the main characters in the show. Classic Loki. Richard E. Grant single-handedly turned the whole show around for me. His miniature arc over that episode, you know, was a kind of classic redemption, learn to do the right thing at the end sort of gig, but just the sheer delivery and the sheer kind of enjoyment that you could see Richard E. Grant having, that kind of campy, comic accurate costume, coupled with his very, you know, Shakespearean grandiose performance, was just so great to watch. And summoning a holographic version of Asgard was just, you know, for sure the standout moment of this series. And then in episode 6 we had the debut of a character who I'm sure is going to be immensely recurring, and who at first I was quite worried about, because I remember seeing pictures of this character in his comic accurate form, and I was like, wait, this is just a human. But shout out to Jonathan Majors, because his performance was so creepy, quite comic, and just very indefinable, which I think lent him such like an alluring but very wary presence in the episode. And I also just really rate how they chose to keep that finale as very much just one extended conversation. Granted, there was so much exposition to kind of grind through there, but also the moral dilemmas faced by Loki and Sylvie at the end of that was a huge and pivotal moment in both of their character journeys, as these 2 characters who've been on the similar trajectory kind of butted heads right at the end there. And I thought it was just a perfect and very intimate way to close the show. And I just really found Tom Hiddleston's performance came into his own there, particularly in episode 6. We got, in my opinion, probably the best blend of, you know, his temptation, his seduction to power, his vulnerability, as well as his intellect. They all kind of just blended together, and I think Hiddleston did the best job he did in the finale. Whereas before, again, a lot of the comic kind of timing, a lot of the forced sentimental moments I really didn't feel landed, and I really didn't feel they'd earned when they appeared in the show. But in episode 6, I think he hit every note perfectly. As did Sylvie. You know, I really like that they kept her character on this journey that she's been committed to all her life, and they didn't give her that, kind of romantic cop-out where Loki managed to persuade her not to. The fact that she went through with killing He Who Remains felt immensely authentic to her character, and I'm really glad that they went through with it. And I'm very intrigued to see whether they go for a reconciliation with Loki and Sylvie moving forward, or a more antagonistic relationship. Either way, I think the friction between the two at a physical level, the fight was really good, as well as this kind of ideological conflict. And I think that line, "You don't know how to trust and I can't be trusted," that Loki says to her, was just this perfect summary that we have an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, and these kind of two innate beings who've never known anything different, maybe potentially being able to alter each other's perspective, is just a really interesting character dynamic that I hope they kind of focus on moving forward. I liked the twist at the end where Loki is obviously crossed into another timeline and is showing the full effects of the multiverse. And obviously confirmation that Loki's getting a season 2 is interesting, especially when, WandaVision hasn't been, and obviously Falcon, there's been a Captain America and Thor confirmed, but not a series of Falcon and the Winter Soldier going forward. So whether that means they're planning on keeping Loki on the small screen, rather than transitioning him back into, the film setup. But I'm very intrigued to see, obviously the multiverse, we're going to see it in No Way Home when Maguire and Garfield return, fingers crossed. It's obviously going to be at the centre of Multiverse of Madness. Presumably the Eternals is going to touch on it to some extent. It just feels very right that Loki is the one leading us into this next catastrophic, chaotic phase of the MCU, and potentially be a massive contributor in stabilising the fallout from it. So what did you guys think of Loki? Please leave some comments below. I'd love to read them and compare notes. Thank you for watching, guys, and please like, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.